the forestry sector.
Thank you, Terry. Since Terry is already on the floor and he has suggested persons who may have questions that, you know, he can possibly answer, he is willing to do so. So I will now ask if anybody want to ask him, since he is live, the questions that you have that he may want to ask Terry so he can respond. So the floor is now open.
And while people are thinking of questions, what I might touch on also is basically equipment. So, you know, the joke around the camp was we're really not in the forestry business, we're in the machine maintenance business. So if you want to be successful here, you know, you can't just take your skidder or truck down the road to a local mechanic shop. You need to have your own mechanics on the ground. You need to have good access to parts from Georgetown, preferably have a stockpile of parts in your camp, filters, obviously tires, anything that you're going to need, engine parts. Try and have all the same machine. So get all Clark 666s or 667s, or if you're going to go with Caterpillar, that's great, but get all the same machines so you don't have an inventory nightmare on spare parts. As far as trucking, you can sub it out to, there are companies here that will do the trucking for you. It's expensive, and you're better off having your own trucks if you can. Again, maintenance is the main issue there. But if you can, try and have your own small fleet of trucks and take it quickly to a barge, that's far, far better off. I would say the size of a camp would be nice to start with would be maybe two skidders and a spare skidder. So when one's down, you can maintain it. A team of, let's say, between harvesters and cutting, probably about a dozen people would be nice to start, and then scale up from there. But I highly recommend not to move in with 50 people and 20 machines. It takes a little while to get a feel for the area. I think that when I started, Go Invest was a huge help. They pointed me in the right direction of government agencies to deal with, who to talk with. If I had a problem, I could go back to Go Invest. The person assigned to on my account always got back to me right away, and they were a huge benefit. I did fill out numerous forms to get duty-free concessions, which was a big help, bringing in the machines we did. And yeah, I can't say enough about Go Invest. They really did a great job for us. Any other questions about on the ground here in Guyana?
Are we still waiting for questions? Are we to assume that he was very clear in saying what are some of the successes, some of the challenges? Any questions for Terry?
Okay, well,
all right.
You can get my contact information from our facilitators today. If anybody has anything afterwards that they think of, please don't hesitate to send me an email. I'll be happy to answer. And also Mr. Singh, I think, is available as a consultant. He has a huge wealth of knowledge. He knows everybody in the business. And I just have to reconfirm that there are many, many concession owners in Guyana that have incredible land, fantastic trees, and they don't have the machinery. They don't have the skidders, they don't have the trucks. So the land is available, the trees are available, it's all managed properly by the Forestry Commission. There's no overlogging, overcutting allowed. It's selective forestry. So there are concessions available where you can partner with local concession owners. Typically, a deal might be you pay a stump fee for each log you take out, which is a reasonable stump fee, and get it to market either domestically or cut it and export it. And again, Mr. Singh or Forestry can provide the typical standard forms, the templates, where contractual arrangement with the local concession owners. I highly recommend you get a good local lawyer that is familiar with forestry laws and the Forestry Act, very important here. to have everything papered. Any other questions?
Okay. There really seem to be no other questions, so I would suggest that, we can wrap it up there. And one of the things I want to just to reiterate based on what you said is that there are opportunities for joint ventures in terms of persons with standing trees, and they can come in and foster relationships along those lines. And I think what was very informative to Terry, not the rest of things that they said were not very important, but machinery standardization. I think that was very smart. So in case of difficulties, you can cannibalize and still get one or two machines, going, right? And having machines that are of different standards, and then, you have their spare parts inventory, among other things. And I think also the point you made about the legal aspect, where people need to understand what are the laws governing how forestry is being exploited here, is very smart. And I think that, persons should also take that on board when they are considering coming to Guyana in terms of making investments in the forestry sector. And the other point you made, which was looking at the whole forestry value chain, where persons can look for opportunities along that chain in terms of seeing where they can utilize their own competitive and comparative advantages. So thank you, Terry. And then I will move to Mr. Singh and open the floor to see if persons have any questions they may want to ask of James before I make some general comments on the other areas that speaks to coconut and small ruminant and livestock. So once again, Terry, thank you, and hope that when you come this way, we can see you in person and have further conversation in terms of how you experience the hospitality and the business environment in Guyana. So thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Well, any questions for James? James is there in terms of wanting clarity. I recognize a lot of issues on other areas of agriculture. And like I said before, the president made very clear that there are opportunities in other areas in agriculture, and I have seen that some are now coming through. To add to that, Dr. Ganga from the Bank of Guyana spoke to capital accounts liberalization, so people can move capital, quite easily. And also he spoke to low inflation rates, which is projected to be less than 2% in 2021. And I think those are areas that business people want to hear how you move capital, inflation, inflationary issues. I also recognize Dr. Ramsarup, who spoke about double taxation treaty with CARICOM and the European Union. And most significantly, he spoke of Guyana pursuing a free market economy model, which speaks to that issues will be dealt with the market in terms of how the market respond to supply, demand, prices, and all of those micro and macroeconomic principles. So I don't know if you have anything to say for James. So I will now open the floor. Now, questions to be posed to Mr. Singh, and then I will make some other remarks as we proceed. Thank you.
I've got a question for Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh, if someone from Europe or North America, wherever, wanted to find a concession and do a joint venture, how would they go about that?
Yeah, thank you, Terry, for that question. There's a formal process that you have to engage in. First of all, you would have to approach a concessionaire, an existing concessionaire, on your own, and you work out the different modalities of how you go about the joint venture. Once that is done, you then write formally to the Guyana Forestry Commission. The commission will then investigate your background because we will check your financial status to ensure that your credibility is there and so on, that the money is come from a legal source, etc. And we will also engage the company to find out why they want to get engaged in the joint venture. Once we are satisfied with the answers, because we don't want that an existing company just hands over the concession to another company and then they sit back and collect money like a landlord. They must be involved also in the management of the concession. So we verified all of those things, and once we are satisfied, we then proceed to advertise in the newspapers. If anyone has any objections, if there are no objections, we then approve the joint venture. So it is not a very lengthy process, but we do our checks and balances to ensure that credible investors come in as joint ventures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Are there any other questions for James? What I can say is that there seems to be a lot of interest in coconuts, in small ruminants, and also finished product like dairy finished products and so forth. I presume value added, maybe like yogurt and other things. What I would suggest is that those persons get in contact with Go Invest, and I want to suggest that they may ask for a business proposal. Once those business proposals are sent to Go Invest is going to send it to the relevant agencies within the Ministry of Agriculture. As an example, the Guyana Livestock Development Authority will deal with all matter livestock. The small ruminant issues will be sent here for us to look at the technical soundness of the proposal. Also, matters related to dairy would be sent to us. In terms of coconut, that will be sent between the section of the ministry that deals with coconut, and I suspect also NARI, the National Agriculture Research Institute, would also play a role in looking at that proposal for coconut. So I will suggest the best thing to do is contact Go Invest, make your request be known through Go Invest by way of a business plan, and they will get in contact with us. So that tends to take away from trying to be chasing many institutions in terms of having your proposal looked at. So we'll look at Go Invest, and then they will deal with the other agencies within the ministry or other agencies within the sector that will specifically address your concern. The floor is still open for persons who have issues they want to raise relevant to agriculture and forestry. What I can also say as persons are getting their thoughts together is that Guyana is more or less self-sufficient in many of the livestock commodities, milk, fresh milk. But when we look at value added in terms of dairy products, there is a large importation bill of about close to 4.7, they're about billion Guyana dollars annually. That's an opportunity there in terms of persons who want to be involved in further processing. When we look at poultry, we are more or less self-sufficient in terms of poultry meat. Same for beef, same for mutton, same for pork, same for chevron, which is goat meat. However, with the economy projected to increase and increase exponentially, it therefore means that there will be heavy demand for those commodities through oil and gas, those platforms, and also tourists who will be coming to the country. So definitely the production capacity will have to be ramped up significantly to meet those growing needs and address those challenges. So there will be opportunity in terms of persons wanting to get into primary production in livestock. Also, when we look at the whole value chain, we want to develop the whole value chain. Along that chain, there are going to be opportunities maybe in feed or inputs or in trucking servicing or in processing as we speak to abattoir and processing facilities in terms of how we can add value to those primary products to meet the demand of the consuming public. Also, there are opportunities for product diversification in terms of maybe new products or looking at what the market demands and to see if there are opportunities that you can utilize as it relates to those commodities. So there are a number of exciting opportunities which people can tap into as it relates to how they could invest within the livestock agriculture sector. Also, there are opportunities for feed because our feed importation bill in terms of corn and soya is very exorbitant. It runs into the billions of dollars annually. And we have the land, which is one of the comparative advantage. We have fresh water, which we don't like to mention a lot about, but fresh water is there. We have favorable climate, and also the different agroecological zones will allow us to utilize those interventions, those technologies to produce at commercial scales so that import substitution can be one of the ways. Plus, we can also look at our relationship with CARICOM, with the CSNME, in terms of moving goods and services into those areas at really competitive and attractive conditions. So there are a number of exciting opportunities that awaits us. And I am happy to say that, you know, I would want to see people start to come into Guyana and to invest because, like I said, there are tremendous opportunity, especially with population diaspora coming home and the demand for certain type of products, the oil and gas platforms. We have already had some amount of contact with those people on the oil and gas platform. And they are talking to us in terms of having meat produced locally to meet their demand. But logically, we have to put the other infrastructural things in place, like abattoirs and processing facility, registered certified farms along the whole production value chain as we move this process forward for people to seek where their economic opportunities for them to invest in Guyana. So I think that is a mouthful in terms of the other areas in livestock agriculture, in terms of other crops that persons can seek to exploit to their economic benefit. So I don't know if there are any further questions. Yes.
Michael, there's one comment that someone made about the shortage of logs on the local sector. One of the things that we are doing is encouraging the sector to increase production. More production obviously means more revenue coming into the Guyana Forestry Commission and the government. It also means more employment opportunities for our people. One of the constraints to log production over the last year has been the COVID pandemic. So a lot of workers have not been going into the interior as before. But what we have seen over the last 2 months is a trend where we are increasing the number of logs that are being produced. And the Guyana Forestry Commission recently advertised 72 areas for allocation. The closing date for the allocation will be sometime in April, I think the 12th of April. So we have 69 small concessions and 3 large concessions that are going to be advertised and hopefully issued by, I would say, by May month end. So again, that is going to be a boon in terms of production. So we still have a long way to go because, as I mentioned, Guyana can produce 1 million cubic meters per year, and we are only producing 400,000 cubic meters. So anything we can do to increase production, including having joint ventures with investors with existing companies, is going to be a welcome initiative. Thank you.
Thanks, James. There's another question from Mr. Mark Lucas, and it speaks to they're looking for greenheart squares to be exported to Europe, and they're looking at up to or approximately 4,000 meter cube annually. And they put some contact information here. So they are asking the question about looking for opportunities to have these greenheart squares, and they specify the quantum and they want to export those into Europe. I don't know if you can make any brief comments on that, James. Thanks.
Sure. Green Heart is one of our primary products, and we have a lot of investors and a lot of persons in the sector who are producing Green Heart. I think a few of them are qualified under the FSC brand also. So I see Mr. Lucas has his email there. We'll take that email and give it to the major exporters of Green Heart, and so they can have that link between them, and then they take it from there. Because we don't really want to get involved in the business of we just match the exporter to the consumer, and that's it.
Thanks, James. There is one from Denise, and it goes like this. I have a lot of leased land, but need help to develop. I am interested in crops and cattle. How will Guyana investment sector help me to get this up and running? One of the first things I want to say, Denise, is your business proposal in terms of how you plan to go about this. And then we can look for opportunities where we can seek to bring some amount of help to you, because there was talk about concessions in terms of having tax break. There are some of the items that have been zero rated in terms of infrastructure development. And so if we can have your business proposal in terms of what you plan to do, how much you plan to do, where the lands are located, then I think that we can take it from there, talk to our key stakeholders in terms of their intervention to see what type of help we can provide for you in terms of trying to get this project off the ground. So I would suggest that you do an outline or a full-blown business proposal when you make contact with Go Invest, and they will then inform GLA and also NARI in terms of what help can be extended to you. If you're dealing, like I said, with cattle, we have subsidized artificial insemination services in terms of some of the breeds, exotic breeds and superior genetics that were brought in. And insemination is roughly about $200 Guyana to have your animal inseminated. We also run pasture development program. We will work with you in terms of developing pasture. We have a nutrition unit that is going to work close with you in terms of helping you to formulate ration as supplement. And we have a very vibrant extension and veterinary service, including an artificial insemination lab. We have a veterinary diagnostic lab. And like I said earlier, with the nutrition lab. So there are a number of supporting programs that can be brought to bear on what you're trying to do in terms of having your program, take flight, so to speak. So let us see what your plans are, and then we can match you to what are some of the interventions that are available. Small Business Bureau would also give grants and also give loans at low concessionary rates. So possibly, in terms of funding, those are areas you can look at, along with some of the traditional lending agencies in terms of whether their interest rates will be attractive enough to encourage you to want to buy money from them or borrow money from them to develop your business. So I would want to just stop there in terms of Denise, so that other persons can make contributions. I have another one here for my good friend James. Considering the LCDS, and as Mr. Singh said, there is not enough logs to supply the local sector. How do we intend to source logs to fulfill the current infrastructure boom? Our focus would be more on importing the timber to avoid deforestation. So they're asking the question, will we focus more on importation of timber to avoid deforestation. So James, I don't know if you can respond to this. And they're talking within the context of the whole sustainable exploitation of our forestry resources, and how we juxtapose that within the context of the low carbon development strategy. Thank you.
Okay. Michael, I answered that question just now, but I'll answer it again. The shortage of logs that we are having on the local market is something that is we have been having for many years. As I mentioned in my presentation, Guyana can produce 1,000 cubic meters of logs per year, but we are only doing about 400,000. So right now, we are encouraging our concessionaires to improve their production. We are asking them to make beneficial occupation, otherwise repossession of their concessions is also on the cards. So everyone is being forewarned. Secondly, the shortage of logs, what has contributed to it last year and this year is the COVID pandemic. So persons were not able to go and work in the hinterland region as before. But we have absolutely no intention of importing forest produce to fulfill our construction boom. I think that it will be a tragedy for Guyana, a country 87% forested, to be importing logs. So we have to do everything that we can within our means to ensure that log production is stepped up. And that is why we are opening the door to investors who want to come into joint ventures with existing concessionaires. Those existing concessionaires have been put on notice. You have to step up production, either through joint ventures or some other means, or you will lose your concession. In terms of the low carbon development strategy, we have the low carbon development strategy. The vice president and some other members of this team are currently working with Norway to finalize another tranche of the low carbon development strategy. And I'm sure that you will hear more about that in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, James, and sorry for having you answer the same question twice, but I think this second response add more value to what was said previously because you elaborated a little more. So thank you again, James, for accommodating that question twice. Are there any other questions any other person have in terms of our panelists seeking to address them so that you will have the type of information that will help you to move to the next stage? Are there any other questions? Floor is open. Because if there aren't any questions, I would want to suggest that we bring this session to a close rather than sitting here. Somebody wants to say something?
Yes, sir. Morning.
Okay, Brian, go ahead, Brian.
Yes, please. I was wondering about the non-timber plants and trees that you have available in the rainforest. Are any of them oil-based? If there are any fruits or palms that you can press to obtain oil out of?
James, you can take that. He is talking about oil-based plants that can be processed to extract oils within our forestry concessions.
I guess that will be something for the specialists in the palm oil area to address. But really in the true forestry's sense, I don't know of any. Or even if there are any, there'll be in a very limited supply. So it's more
Okay, fair.
to the oil palm industry.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, I trust that help, but one of the things I would want to suggest is that we have a wide biodiversity, and the mere fact that you brought it up suggests to me it is something we need to look into, because there may be some economic opportunities lying there in terms of those species being underexploited, and more significantly, they can be used to add value in terms of diversifying what comes out of our forestry as it relates to business opportunities. So I want to suggest we need to take this further. I will suggest to our colleagues that somewhere along the line, we need to look at this to see if there are economic opportunities. And one of the things might be is an inventory of such crops or such plants or such trees, whether they are in economic commercial quantity, to allow us to move it to that stage. So Brian, could you just send some information for me in the chat group, so that I can have some follow-up done on that to you when I submit the questions and contacts of persons to go invest, and you can follow up through them. I'll appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Sure, I can. You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Welch. My name is Leslie Austin. You would have mentioned coconut earlier in your speech, but I don't recall you going into detail on it. Is it possible that you can probably give me any information you possibly can on coconut production, that sort of stuff?
Okay, I am not an expert in coconut. I am more in animal science.
Okay.
But like I suggested, whatever you want, just send it in the chat, and I will direct it to the relevant people who will definitely get in contact with you. The two institutions that deal with coconut is NARI, they deal with coconut, and we have the coconut unit up at Hope Estate. And incidentally, there's a lot of emphasis on coconut this year, because I think in our budget, a lot of emphasis will be placed on setting up new nurseries to have seedlings available, because they want to see the resuscitation of the coconut sector. So I think that once I get that information, I can then disseminate it to the relevant people, and I'm quite certain they will be willing to provide a response to you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Austin. I noticed Jean on the screen. Is Jean trying to make a comment?
Well, if you're talking Jean-François, that might be me, yeah. Good morning, Mr. Welch. In order to answer the question that Brian asked, we are involved in processing of palm from the mandible palm, one of the wild palm, for 32 years. We are a large concessionaire. I don't think there is any large quantities of palm for oil production in the wild. For our 32 years of experience in that area, you wouldn't find that. Now, oil palm is one of the palm that unfortunately has been given a very bad reputation to any exploitation of palm trees, because large plantations of palm for oil had to be planted at the detriment of forestry. So it might be more interesting for whoever is interested in this thing to look at reforestation. And there are areas in Guyana which have been actually damaged through mining, or areas that could be useful for reforestation and interesting for plantation of large plantation of palm for oil, because it's a special palm and you won't find it in the wild in sufficient quantity. You will find only for small craft, and a few villages are doing this craft.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Gene. Brian, I think that it would be very useful if yourself and Gene could link, because he has brought to the fore some very important information which may be of interest to you. So I suggest that, you guys can link and exchange notes to see where that leads.
Yes, will do. Thanks a lot. No empty hole.
There is an inquiry in terms of self-sufficiency in livestock and some of the other crops product in Guyana. So the question is being asked, if that is the situation, what are the opportunities for persons to still invest in those sectors if we're talking self-sufficiency? But what I said also is that Guyana is going through a rapid boom in terms of development. And the oil and gas has presented some unique opportunities. We have not yet started to supply those sector, and also the mining sector, where there is high demand for a lot of these products. So as people come in terms of the hospitality industry developing, and also people from the diaspora who are returning home, the mining sector, the oil sector, there are going to be opportunities for more demand, or more demand would be created for these products. In addition to that, like I said earlier too, that a lot of imports takes place, but there are many value-added products in the livestock sector. So if we increase production and persons want to get into the value chain in terms of looking at processing, then there are also going to be opportunity, because the fresh pork or the fresh meat market is more or less saturated. So opportunities will have to be created in terms of those areas I mentioned, oil, gas, the mining sector, and also people looking at opportunities for further processing in terms of adding value. In addition to that, there are also markets right in CARICOM that we can possibly explore the possibility of getting into those markets so as to create more demands, but outside of Guyana, so that increased supply will not saturate the domestic market. But we have markets in other parts of the Caribbean and elsewhere that might be willing to take us some of these produce. So there's a lot of work to be done. There are a lot of opportunities. And I think that once we approach it strategically and in a smart way, we can definitely make these into very useful and successful business ventures. Yeah. Brian?
Yes, please.
All right.
Oh, sorry, I had left my thing on mute accidentally.
Sorry. I just got a cue that we need to wrap up now. So permit me to say thank you for your participation. And I see something about, can you send me information supply of plantain, sweet potato, cassava, and coconuts? All right, we'll do. So we need to wrap up, and I thank the presenter, Mr. James Singh, my good colleague, and Terry, in terms of sharing his own personal experience with doing business in Guyana, and also the other participants who share their experience, who ask questions, and who have expressed an interest to doing business in Guyana. So once again, I say thank you, and Guyana is open for business. Go Invest is our next step in terms of having our plans, questions answered, and then Go Invest will contact the subject matter agencies to see how we can bring those, bring answers to those questions that you might have presented. So once again, thank you, and hope to see you shortly in Guyana once we move to the next phase.